major difference is the difference between authority and responsibility. I was certainly taught that to solve a problem, I have to have the authority. How many times have you gone to your boss and said, "Boss, you want me to solve this problem. If you can just reorganize and get everyone to report to me, we're going to solve this problem." Right? This is a very natural thing for human to do. Give me the authority if you are burdening me with the responsibility. And in this Toyota world that we have derived this from, there is actually a distinction between authority, which is an org chart idea, it's a vertical idea, and responsibility that is a horizontal idea. And as you will hear in John's talk later about A3, it is a routine thing at Toyota for a person to be asked to analyze and try to solve a problem involving people and departments over which they have no authority at all. And for us, that would seem to be an absurdity. And in modern management, typically, you are judged on results at the end of a reporting period. Make your numbers. Let us set your objectives. This is what Toyota calls rear view mirror management. That you drive down the road and you look in the rear view mirror to see what you've run over. And they suggest this is not an intelligent way to drive. The contrast is management by process. Instead of telling me about your results, please tell me, the person above that you're reporting to, tell me about your process. Tell me about how capable it is. Tell me about how robust it is, how much mura there is, how much muri. If you are managing every aspect of your process every day, your results will be what they are supposed to be. A process produces exactly what it is capable of producing. Not more, not less. If it is only capable of producing mura and muri, I guarantee it will produce mura and muri. If it has been designed and managed in a way that it is stable, you will get the result you expect. Just to sum up on that, if the process is right, the results will be right. If the process is wrong, no matter how you're being incentivized to get results, the results will actually be disappointing. How do you plan? A third aspect. Do you plan from the top down, in which you say the whole point here is to make the plan? The point of management is to make the plan. Or do you plan through a circular feedback loop in which the boss says, instead of "here's the plan," the boss says, "what do you think the problem is?" This is to the next level down in the organization. What do you think the root cause is? What do you think the potential solutions are? Not one, please. Please, please. And by the way, solution's really the wrong word. Let's just call them countermeasures. What are the potential countermeasures? What is the best apparent countermeasure to experiment with? And who, when, where, how is going to conduct the experiment with the countermeasure to see if it can deal with the problem? And by the way, what is the measure, the simple, objective measure of whether the experiment has been successful? This idea, to say it another way, that you have this plan from the top, and if properly implemented, it produces results. I've just said this in another way, that the alternative way to think, the lean way, is that all plans are simply experiments. They're simply experiments, and they are evaluated through PDCA. My daughter is getting a PhD in chemistry, and I go to her lab, and she says, "Gee, Dad, you do realize in real science, mostly the hypothesis is rejected. How come out where you live in management, it would appear that almost all hypotheses are confirmed?" Okay, that it is successful. This is not true in the physical world. Why would this be true in the management world? And I said, "Well, Carrie, I don't have an answer. In fact, I think you've actually answered the question by asking it." Where do you make decisions? This is really interesting. And what I see when I go to companies is they make decisions in conference rooms, looking at screens with lots of data. Lots of data. And then when I go to the Toyota world that we know about, what I discover is that the idea is to go to the Gemba, which is the place where value is actually being created, or perhaps only waste is being created, and to, as they say, convert data into facts. And Taiichi Ohno, I guess, said this to begin with, said, I like data, but what I really love are facts. And what he meant was data in context. You go see. By the way, most data aren't right, and most data are irrelevant to the actual situation, the actual issue. So go see. Ask why. Why? Ask why. And as you do that, show respect. Highest form of respect is to go to someone who works for you, works with you, and because they are smart and because you respect them, you ask them very hard questions to which neither of you knows the answer. You ask why. That's how you show respect. And then when you do have problems as a manager, who solves the problem? Well, that modern management world at the top, that's why we have the staff. That's why we've got all the belts. You know, the green belts and the lean belts and the whatever belts, the black belts, mean belts, I don't know, that's the cost production guys. Standardization. We all sort of, in some way, believe in standardization. Modern management, again, the standardizing is done by the staff. By the industrial engineer. Someone who goes around and standardizes others' work, typically with little Gemba interaction and with no auditing. Very interesting. I was recently in a company where they had engineers had worked out the amount of time it took to do every job. And so we walked along through an end-to-end process. And it turned out that the amount of time on the official engineering documents to do the job had no relation whatsoever at all at that point in history to how long it took to do anything. And yet all the travelers that were then bundled up into the MRP had all these time assumptions that were all wrong. Everybody knew they were wrong. And they said, but, you know, the engineer did it, and so it's been documented. And so there it is. And that's so totally different from thinking that the job of frontline management working with the direct primary workforce is to standardize the work so everybody agrees this is the best way to do it, this is how long it takes, this is precisely what we need. And we're all going to do it that way because we were involved in figuring it out until we agree to try an experiment, which is what Kaizen is. Kaizen is PDCA, to see if we can do it better. And if we can do it better, well, then we'll have a new standard, and if we can't, we go back to the previous standard. So how do you think about standardization? As a staff activity done to people, or as a line activity done with people? How do you identify what customers you want to work with? And what is your relationship? And typically in a modern management company, it's categories of customers involved in short-term transactions. But the biggest problem with a short-term transactional relation between you and your customer is that neither you nor your customer can learn anything. And we'll have some very interesting discussion later today about what happens when you reverse that logic, as you see below, as you identify customers by category of problem to solve. What problem is it we are going to solve for you? And how are we going to do that through a long-term problem-solving collaboration? Go fast. Don't you all think you ought to go fast? What we call now jumping to solutions. Jump to solutions. And it is amazing how much of what goes on in an organization is jumping to a solution and then working backwards to prove that that actually is the answer to the problem. And by the way, once you've got that solution, you become deeply invested in it because you're going to be judged. And as we say before, there are no tolerances in most organizations for experimental failure, for experiments that fail. Alternative, in the Toyota world, is go slow. Start with the problem. Keep digging. You probably haven't figured out the problem. Go deeper. Once you've figured out the problem, what are a whole range of possible countermeasures, not just one? Now let's think about it. Looks like this is the best. Probably some combination of those you thought of. Let's try an experiment. What they call go slow in order to go fast.